Hey guys, it's your girl Sage. I hope you're having a wonderful day or night whenever this video finds you. I'm here with our daily bread, and for today we have 1 Kings chapter 7, Solomon's other buildings. But Solomon took 13 years to build his own house, so he finished all his house. He also built the house of the forests of Lebanon. Its length was 100 cubits, its width 50 cubits, and its height 30 cubits, with 4 rows of cedar pillars and cedar beams on the pillars. And it was paneled with cedar above the beams that were on 45 pillars, 15 to a row. There were windows with bevel frames in 3 rows, and window was opposite window in 3 tiers. And all the doorways and doorposts had rectangular frames, and window was opposite window in 3 tiers. He also made the hall of pillars. Its length was 50 cubits, and its width 30 cubits, and in front of them was a portico with pillars, and a canopy was in front of them. Then he made a hall for the throne, the hall of judgment, where he might judge, and it was paneled with cedar from floor to ceiling. And the house where he dwelt had another court inside the hall, of like workmanship. Solomon also made a house like this hall for Pharaoh's daughter, whom he had taken as wife. All these were of costly stones. All these were of costly stones, cut to size, trimmed with saws, inside and out, from the foundation to the eaves, and also on the outside to the great court. The foundation was of costly stones, large stones, some 10 cubits and some 8 cubits. And above were costly stones, hewn to size, and cedar wood. The great court was enclosed with 3 rows of hewn stones and a row of cedar beams. So were the inner court of the house of the Lord and the vestibule of the temple. Hiram the craftsman. Now King Solomon sent and brought Hiram from Tyre. He was the son of a widow from the tribe of Naphtali, and his father was a man of Tyre, a bronze worker. He was filled with wisdom and understanding and skill in working with all kinds of bronze work. So he came to King Solomon and did all his work. The bronze pillars for the temple. And he cast 2 pillars of bronze, each one 18 cubits high, and a line of 12 cubits measured the circumference of each. Then he made 2 capitals of cast bronze to set on the tops of the pillars. The height of one capital was 5 cubits, and the height of the other capital was 5 cubits. He made a lattice network with wreaths of chain work for the capitals, which were on top of the pillars, 7 chains for one capital and 7 chains for the other capital. So he made the pillars and 2 rows of pomegranates above the network, all around to cover the capitals that were on top, and thus he did for the other capital. The capitals which were on top of the pillars in the hall were in the shape of lilies, 4 cubits. The capitals on the 2 pillars also had pomegranates above, by the convex surface which was next to the network, and there were 200 such pomegranates in rows of each of the capitals all around. Then he set up the pillars by the vestibule of the temple. He set up the pillar on the right and called its name Jachin, and he set up the pillar on the left and called its name Boaz. The tops of the pillars were in the shape of lilies, so the work of the pillars was finished. The sea and the oxen. And he made the sea of cast bronze, 10 cubits from one brim to the other. It was completely round. Its height was 5 cubits, and a line of 30 cubits measured its circumference. Below its brim were ornamental buds encircling it all around, 10 to a cubit, all the way around the sea. The ornamental buds were cast in 2 rows when it was cast. It stood on 12 oxen, It stood on 12 oxen, 3 looking toward the north, 3 looking toward the west, 3 looking toward the south, and 3 looking toward the east. The sea was set upon them, and all their back parts pointed inward. It was a handbreadth thick, and its brim was shaped like the brim of a cup, like a lily blossom. It contained 2,000 baths. The carts and the lavers. Or is it lavers? Please forgive me. He also made 10 carts of bronze. 4 cubits was the length of each cart, 4 cubits its width, and 3 cubits its height. And this was the design of the carts. They had panels, and the panels were between frames. On the panels that were between the frames were lions, oxen, and cherubim. And on the frames was a pedestal on top. Below the lions and oxen were wreaths of plated work. Every cart had 4 bronze wheels and axles of bronze, and its 4 feet had supports. Under the laver were supports of cast bronze beside each wreath. Its opening inside the crown at the top was 1 cubit in diameter, and the opening was round, shaped like a pedestal. 1.5 cubits in outside diameter, and also on the opening were engravings, but the panels were square, not round. Under the panels were the 4 wheels, and the axles of the wheels were joined to the cart. The height of a wheel was 1.5 cubits. The workmanship of the wheels was like the workmanship of a chariot wheel. Their axle pins, their rims, their spokes, and their hubs were all of cast bronze. And there were 4 supports at the 4 corners of each cart. Its support were part of each of the cart itself. On the top of the cart, at the height of 0.5 cubit, it was perfectly round. And on the top of the cart, its flanges and its panels were of the same casting. On the plates of its flanges and on its panels he engraved cherubim, lions, and palm trees, wherever there was clear space on each, with wreaths all around. Thus he made 10 carts. All of them were of the same mold, 1 measure, and 1 shape. Then he made 10 lavers of bronze. Each laver contained 40 baths, and each laver was 4 cubits. On each of the 10 carts was a laver. And he put 5 carts on the right side of the house and 5 on the left side of the house. He set the sea on the right side of the house towards the southeast. Furnishings of the temple. Hiram made the lavers and the shovels and the bowls. So Hiram finished doing all the work that he was to do for King Solomon for the house of the Lord. The 2 pillars, the 2 bowl-shaped capitals that were on top of the 2 pillars, and the 2 networks covering the 2 bowl-shaped capitals which were on top of the pillars. 400 pomegranates and 2 networks, 2 rows of pomegranates for each network, to cover the 2 bowl-shaped capitals that were on top of the pillars. The 10 carts and 10 lavers on the carts, 1 sea, and 12 oxen under the sea, the pots, the shovels, and the bowls. All these articles which Hiram made for King Solomon for the house of the Lord were burnished bronze. In the plain of the Jordan the king had them cast in clay molds between Succoth and Zaretan. And Solomon did not weigh all the articles because there were so many, the weight of the bronze was not determined. Thus Solomon had all the furnishings made for the house of the Lord, the altar of gold and the table of gold on which was the showbread. The lampstands of pure gold, 5 on the right side and 5 on the left in front of the inner sanctuary, with the flowers of the lamps and the wick trimmers of gold. The basins, the trimmers, the bowls, the ladles, and the censers of pure gold, and the hinges of gold, both for the doors of the inner room, the most holy place, and for the doors of the main hall of the temple. So all the work that King Solomon had done for the house of the Lord was finished, and Solomon brought in the things which his father David had dedicated, the silver and the gold and the furnishings. He put them in the treasuries of the house of the Lord. Okay, so let's talk about it. And thank you also just for being with me getting through that. I kind of struggled reading through that because of all the small details, but that's actually what I really want to talk about. First off, I myself, I'm not the best when it comes to these kind of details that are being read throughout the Bible. But while I was reading this actually had me thinking about when the Lord was instructing Moses upon how to build his tabernacle while they were out in the wilderness. But however, this is an established building. And I'll be honest with you guys, it was really hard for me to get through when I was reading it. But that's why I want to turn you on to this. This is a small little booklet. You can get it on Amazon pretty cheap, I would say. But it's quite nice because it actually goes a little bit into detail and describing exactly how the temple had been built. This one covers Solomon's temple and Herod's temple as well. But I'm also going to go ahead and post some pictures about what the temple was intended to look like. But I always encourage, do your own research. But with that all being said, let's go ahead and talk about why the Lord wants all this detail. Because the truth is, we know that the Lord, his ways of thinking are higher than ours. We know that he's the one that created the heavens and the earth. And we know that he pays attention to every small little detail. I say that concerning gravity, and because if you even alter gravity a little bit, you can change the size of a bug or make it so people are having difficulty breathing, just depending on that change in gravity. But also how we have so many fruits and vegetables that we consume and they nourish our bodies in different ways. I'll be honest with you guys, I'm a huge nerd and I love physiology. Physiology is the study of the way in which nutrients and supplements derived from organic element or nature interacts with the human body, whether it's ingested, applied topically, inhaled, no matter what. But nonetheless, the Lord is very detailed in all of his works. And we also know his relationship with King Solomon. King Solomon had asked him to bless him with wisdom. So the Lord not only blesses Solomon with wisdom, but also blesses him with riches, with wives, with esteem. And we also know that a good name is more desirable than silver and gold, especially since we know that King Solomon was the one that was assisting with I want to say it was the book of Proverbs that was being written. Even though we also know the main antagonist as a Lady Wisdom, protagonist as Lady Wisdom. Again, I apologize. This chapter, it goes very detailed into each and every way in which the temple had been built. And also even just reading right here that we see that Solomon's temple lasted from 960 BC to 586 BC. But it also went to include very important structures of Solomon himself. It included the house that he had his wife reside in. It involved his housing as well. And it really just went to dedicate how much of his life was dedicated to the Lord. So much to the point where, he wouldn't entrust anyone to build the temple of the Lord unless he would also entrust the same person to build his own abode. Solomon went for the best of the best, the creme de la crop. And the Lord saw this. And again, that's why we have so much detail on here, because the Lord had blessed him with somebody who could assist in building this exactly to the fine details that the Lord wanted his house of worship to be built in. When we are designing blueprints to build our own house, or say we're decorating a bedroom or something, we want it to be as custom to our liking as possible. And especially for the Lord Almighty, who, again, the Lord Almighty, he took his time when it came to decorating the earth with plants, with animals, with, again, altering the gravity and the oxygen levels so that we may prosper on it. Because, again, if we alter any of that, it could severely change our lives and affecting us in a very positive or negative way. More likely negative, I would say, since I think for the most part we're doing okay right now. But nonetheless, I just wanted to really just focus on Solomon's attention to detail, to what it is that the Lord was asking of him when it came to the building of his temple. But also something that caught my attention too was the 2 bronze pillars. I want to go ahead and just quickly talk about them before I wrap this up. So it's interesting that the pillars were named, and we see that the names were Jachin and Boaz. And I actually went ahead and looked up those names before recording this video, and we actually see that, I have it written right here, that Jachin represents he establishes and thankful. So right there, again, the 2 pillars that were dedicated to the temple directly, these 2 amazing giant pillars that were garnished with lilies and pomegranates, symbolizing life and wisdom. We see Jachin represents he establishes and thankful. So this is giving gratitude back to the Lord. And again, with all of these furnishings of bronze and gold all throughout the temple, there was no amount of money that was too high to be dedicated to the Lord. And then Boaz, which I really want to talk about. Boaz meaning provision, kindness, responsibility, strength. Again, this kind of alludes to a couple of different things. So Boaz, we also know Boaz from the book of Ruth, being Ruth's second husband after her first husband passes, and she goes with Naomi to return to her homeland. So Ruth herself used to be a Moabite, but she went with her mother-in-law back to her homeland, where she met Boaz, her former passed on husband's next of kin. And they're known as one of the sweetest love stories. He saw her, he heard of her good reputation of being a kind-hearted, fair woman, and he took very good care of her. He ensured that she would be safe gleaning in his fields, and they ended up falling in love with each other, where they themselves had begot Obed, who begot Jesse, who begot King David, who begot King Solomon. So there is a lot of connection here going on. But also Boaz, in the story of the book of Ruth, he was the one that provided for Ruth. He was the one that protected Ruth. And basically, when we think about the relationship between Boaz and Ruth, it becomes husband and wife. And I've mentioned in other videos that in the New Testament, that the Lord, he dissolves his former covenant with his people because his people cannot respect his covenant, and he creates a new one where he establishes himself in the role of the husband, being the provider, the protector, and the one that leads the family. So again, I think that's very significant because these names, Boaz and Jachin, they're dedicating a couple of different things here. So again, with Jachin, it's establishing or dedicating that the Lord has established his people. The Lord is established. Again, he's the one that sits in the throne of heaven and earth is his footstool. But also our gratitude for that, because honestly, I could not imagine anyone better than God that could be God. And not to mention also just sharing our gratitude and praise and worship for the fact that he created everything. And again, I've mentioned this many times. He created everything to the finite details. You know, I'm talking the patterns of a leaf, or the way that a rose smells, or the way that animals grow and develop in certain ways. I saw a cute little video recently that was suggesting that pandas were God's way of showing he has a sense of humor. I thought that was very cute. But nonetheless, he created all these things, yet he still decided that he needed to create us, you and me, all of us. You know, and that's just so beautiful. So he does deserve all the praise and worship. And we should be thankful for that, especially if we had the blessing of waking up this morning. But also with Boaz, kind of representing who the Lord is to us in our lives, and a reminder of that as well, that he is the one that provides for us. He is the one that protects us. He is the one that takes responsibility for us. Now, he gives us free will and blesses us with that and respects that about us. But at the same time, just like a responsible father that sees that their child may be going in the wrong direction, he's going to correct his child to ensure that his child grows up to be an upright, morally standing citizen. So nonetheless, all these little details that went into building this temple, it's supposed to represent a physical manifestation of who the Lord is. He's very detail-oriented. Again, the Lord is also not to be spared. He asks us to tithe for him about 20% of what we make. And also he challenges us that if we were to tithe our entire storehouse, that, I'm trying to remember the scripture, I apologize. If we were to tithe everything, that he would open the floodgates and show us that he is Lord and he is the one that provides for us, and that we should not be worrying about pinching onto our pennies or clinging onto our money, and not idolizing our money as a sense of worship, because the Lord knows what he's doing, especially when we dedicate our money back to him. And that's exactly what King Solomon is doing here, especially at the end in 1 Kings chapter 7, verse 51. So all the work that King Solomon had done for the house of the Lord was finished, and Solomon brought in the things which his father David had dedicated, the silver and the gold and the furnishings. He put them in the treasuries of the house of the Lord, because he knew that they belonged to the Lord, and he rededicated them the same way that his father, who had this loving, amazing relationship with the Lord, he rededicated those things back to the Lord. He didn't take them for himself, because he knows that an esteemed name and a good relationship with the Lord is far more valuable than any silver or gold that we could ever amass here on earth. And again, that's also why Jesus tells us, do not store up treasures for yourself on earth, but rather focus on, put your thoughts towards the kingdom of heaven and store up treasures for yourself there, where moths will not be able to eat that. I know I butchered that. I have to be honest with you guys. My eggs are a little scrambled this morning. I didn't get the best sleep. But nonetheless, I really just want to focus on this chapter, summarizing it with, this kind of gives us an idea of who the Lord is. The Lord is somebody who is, again, not to be spared of, or not to have our best withheld from him. If we remember way back in the book of Genesis with the story of Cain and Abel, where Cain was responsible for the livestock and Abel was responsible for the produce. And, they both made offerings to the Lord, where Cain made an offering to the Lord of like a decent sheep or a decent ram. It's been a minute since I read it. And meanwhile, Abel had given him his largest, best fruits in his opinion. He was like, Lord, these are the best fruits. And the Lord received Abel's offering, but rejected Cain's offering, because he knew that Cain was holding back. And the Lord is not somebody that we should be holding back any of ourselves from, or any of our tithings from, because it's the Lord that blesses us with those things in the first place. But also with his detail, again, this is just going to show that the Lord is he's in control of everything. He pays attention to the smallest details of what he wants, but also of our lives. And again, he fine-tuned everything to be perfect so that you and I could be here right now. And, so we have to trust in his ability to be able to provide for us, but also his ability to design our lives around us. And actually saying all that reminds me of a song from Pat Beret, I think. Pat Beret, Build My Life. It's a really beautiful song, and it's coming to mind right now. But really why we should be entrusting that the Lord, much like a faithful husband or a loving parent, to provide for us, to provide for our needs. For he's the one that knitted us in our mother's wombs, and he knows that we are fearfully and wonderfully made, because he's the one that designed us. So he knows us better than we know ourselves. He knows every hair that we have on our head, and he is the one that watches over us and thinks about us daily, thinks about us more than there are grains of sand at the beach. So why it's important for us to have that relationship with the Lord, because he loves us and he pays attention to even the smallest details in our lives. So, in any case, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this video up here. I'm praying that this message blessed someone. And if it did, feel free to like, subscribe, and until next time, I hope all of y'all take care. Bye-bye!